unemployment is going down. Economic growth is back. But saying that we should not be naive, I want to say that we have to tackle the problems which are ahead of us, and I think that we are best prepared to do so. But we are not in the best form and shape we could be in.
Well, there are some who've compared the vision of Saturday and the 27 leaders there to musicians on board the Titanic. Oh. I mean, it's not as dramatic as that. What words would you give to the people of Europe? You have put down on a paper certain visions for the form of Europe. You mentioned World War II. Countries then unified around this idea of bringing peace and security to this continent. But now there doesn't seem to be that vision that the people can unite around.
Yeah, but that's not the reason not to tell the people that the very origin of the European Union, the European integration and European construction was the result of World War II. We have to remind those we are living with that this was the real reason to build the European Union. But as I said, this is not a sufficient explanation or narrative, as we are saying today, because it's mainly about the future. My generation is an intergeneration. We are children of those who experienced the Second World War, and we have children and grandchildren, yes, we have grandchildren too, who don't know anything about that, but we have to organize in the best way possible the future for them.
You obviously, President of the European Commission, are a great believer in the European Union. But when Theresa May is not there on Saturday, what will be in your mind as the way to stop others following suit, other member states walking out the door? Will you try and use the negotiations around Brexit to put others off?
Even if the British PM is not there, I will have the British people in my heart. Because Britain belongs to Europe in a way or another, but Britain is part of Europe. So Brexit or not Brexit, we should not forget that the European continent has a duty when it comes to Britain, because without Churchill and without the resilience of the British people, we wouldn't be there where we are now. So I'm everything but in an hostile mood when it comes to Britain, but I don't want others to take the same avenue, because let's suppose for 1 second that others would leave. 2, 3, 4, 5, that would be the end.
How do you balance that in Brexit negotiations? On the one hand, wanting to keep the UK close, as you said, but on the other, wanting to ensure that others are put off leaving. I mean, could those negotiations not turn nasty?
When it comes to negotiations, the European Union and the Commission, having been tasked with this negotiation, will negotiate in a friendly way, in a firm way, and we are not naive.
So will there be a fee to pay?
It will be a bill reflecting former commitments by the British government and by the British Parliament. There will be no sanctions, no punishment, nothing of that kind. But Britain has to know, and I suppose that the government does know it, they have to honour the commitments and the former commitments.
To the tune of £50 billion?
But I don't have, I was mentioning like that weeks ago, 50, 60 billions is around that, but that's not the main story. We have to calculate scientifically what the British commitments were, and then the bill has to be paid. You cannot live like that as if you had never been member of the European Union. Britain was a member of the European Union. Britain was taking on its shoulders the commitments, and these commitments have to be honoured.
Again, on Saturday, you know, although the leaders will be meeting to celebrate, there's a lot of talk about the people of Europe. There are 4.5 million Europeans who are very nervous at the moment. 3 million living in the UK, European citizens in the UK, 1.5 living British people living elsewhere in the European Union. Does that remain, like the British government says for the Commission, a priority to make sure that they know what is to come?
It's for me a priority. It's about people. The British did take in a sovereign way the decision they have taken, but people are living there. Women, men, workers, independent people, children. We don't have the right to eject them from our system. So I'm strongly in favor. I shouldn't say that this, as Hollande wrote, a president shouldn't say this. I am strongly committed to preserve the rights of the Europeans living in Britain and of the British people living on the European continent. This is not about bargaining. This is about respecting human dignity.
The next big challenge, if you like, in the calendar, once Article 50 has been officially triggered and everything, the French elections. How worried are you about them? Will you be talking to President Hollande about that on Saturday?
It could easily happen that I would talk with François Hollande on this, but I have to say that although in some corners of my imagination being very much concerned about the outcome of these elections, I have to say that we shouldn't consider elections as a crisis of democracies. It's something normal. A country is going for elections, France, Germany, as the Dutch did a week ago. This is not a crisis. And so there is room for a normal democratic debate. And so let's be confident in the wisdom of those who are going to elections.
And do you think a corner has been turned? At the end of last year, I was hearing voices in this building saying this could be the end of this project. We have so many challenges. Look at rising populist nationalism. But you've had the Dutch elections. Macron is doing very well in France, Martin Schulz in Germany. Do you think sort of Europe is being pulled in two different directions, populist nationalists on the other side very pro-EU?
I do think that we have to make a clear distinction between populists, radical populists, those being against all the others, being only reflecting on their own destiny, and those who are Eurosceptical. I have a huge understanding for those who have more questions than answers when it comes to the European Union, and we should respect that, and we should argue with them. I don't like the extreme right parties. That's something I don't like. But talking, discussing, debating with those who are Eurosceptical because they have, as I said, more questions than answers is something we should proactively engage with.
Do you think there was enough, from your side, from your opinion, engagement with the Eurosceptics in the United Kingdom before the referendum? I mean, you are President of the Commission, but who does talk about feelings. How will you feel on Wednesday when that letter of notification, that formal letter of notification arrives here in Brussels?
I will be sad, as I was sad when the vote, the referendum took place in Britain. For me, it is a tragedy. There is such a long, intense, interrelated history between the continent and Britain that I don't have an explanation for that, although I have particular and personal.
But does it feel like a failure, President Juncker?
It's a failure and a tragedy.
What would be your words on the EU's 60th anniversary for the 52% in the UK who voted to leave and the 48% who voted to stay and are now very worried about their future?
I love both of them because Britain is Britain, and the fact that 48% of the British people were voting yes, and the fact that 52% of the British were voting no should not lead us to the conclusion that Britain is definitely separated in two parts.
President Juncker, thank you very, very much for your time.
Thank you.